All right, that is the time for quick building. I would encourage everyone to stop the quick building time. I would also remind the government team to both opening and creating feedback their speaker name and position in the chat box so that we will start immediately and you can start filling in the ballot. Awesome. We're still missing opening government. Opening government, are you here?
Oh, geez.
Yep. Put your speaker position in the chat box. In the meantime, well, hi everyone. My name is Bobby. I'll be your chair for this round. Teaching us today is going to be a panel of Jessica and training of history, and also Nura. Yeah, on side of student government, we have Universitas Airlangga, on side of Universitas we have Parahyangan, inside facing we have Tanjungpura, and inside facing office room. Under the notion of, sorry, yep, under the motion of this House supports the norm encouraging the use of radical honesty in romantic relationship, I will ask the panelists to start the debate. Here. Also, before we start, please do state your preferred method of POI, and please put the other speaker to abide by that particular speaker's preferred method of POI. Good luck and have fun.
Okay. Is my voice audible? Okay, thank you. Setting up my timer. POIs through unmuting yourself. Okay. Okay. Going to start in 3, 2, 1. Opening government believes that the norm of encouraging the use of radical honesty will result into better communications that exist inside relationships, thus causing better rational decisions inside the relationships, thus causing better relationships in the general, helping both sides of the relationship. This is what we stand for. So one piece of framing on what the supporting looks like in our case of encouraging the norm. Encouraging the norm looks like 4 things. First, we do campaign in social media, normalizing the idea that you need to have radical honesty, that you cannot lie about anything, that it is very important to have radical honesty. B, glorifying in social media that it's okay to be radically honest. C, telling your friends that you should probably be radically honest. This means like telling people around you, your parents, your friends, or like people you know, that being radically honest is now the standard, being radically honest is the norm. But lastly, we create and participate in discourse discussing what radical honesty looks like and how it will affect people. We also discuss on how we handle and do radical honesty. So this looks like us normalizing the idea of our partners stating their flaws, us normalizing or training people, or like teaching people on how to accept other people's flaws, accept people's mistakes, things such as this, which I guess is a preemptive on an argument if opposition wants to say that, oh, people might not be ready to receive the honesty, people might not get normalized to the idea of radical honesty. No, since this is the norm, there is a possibility, and we will try for people, and we will attempt, encourage for people to be able to get used to this idea of radical honesty. So 2 pieces of arguments in this debate. First of all, why the quality of communication will be better, and secondly, the dynamics of relationship and why we have better relationship in our side of the house. Sure, before going out, take
so the supporting means that you will only post this in social media accounts for people to interact, and there's no actual tangible society intervention whatsoever on individuals' relationship.
No. I gave you 4 things. First of all, we said that there are social relationships that we do. We encourage our friends, people around us. Yes, social media is one of them. We create campaigns, we create seminars, we create discourse that exists within our society. Yeah, I don't get where this was leading. Okay, so first of all, why quality of communication in our side would be better? There are 3 points in this. First point, it's not that communication does not exist in opposition side of the house, but communication that exists in opposition is first of all suppressed by your pride. It is suppressed by your ego. It is suppressed by your partner. Communication issues could also come from past trauma, from past relationships that might incentivize you to not do communication. This point explains that communication issue is highly dynamic between people in your side of the house. in your side of the house, this is the issue that in status quo about lack of normalization of communication. There is a lack of normalization of being radically honest inside of your communication. Most of the time, you do not talk honestly with your partner because you are sad. Your partner is because you are scared that your partner is going to be sad, that your partner is going to be mad, or they're going to leave you things such as this. This is the problem in status quo that we're trying to solve. So I need to emphasize that communication is really important. In romantic relationship, communication is key. When you are suppressing your boundaries, it is going to be hard to communicate that. This is where the norm plays a part. It prevents bad confrontation and holding back your emotion. If it is continuously suppressed, it becomes a ticking time bomb. The norm exactly incentivizes you to do communication, even if you have these irrational fears, even if you have these irrational thoughts, that communication is still important. I'm going to prove to you why, even if this irrational fear does exist, the communication will still result into something that is good. But will result into something that is good, because communication that is done by being radically honest means that you could actually deliver your points to the other side of the house. You could deliver your points to your partners. Points that are radically honest means that you could act rationally, which brings me to my third point. Even if communication does exist in opposition side of the house, the form of communication in opposition side of the house is still very bad because of three reasons. First, communication will not be effective because of the information that is being communicated is not fully true or fully real. This is because there is no incentive from people for you to have to always tell the truth. But B, communication without full truth will result into irrational decisions. This is because the decisions that you make are based on wrong information or lack of information, and it does not give you the capability of acting rational, because you need the right information, or you need enough information to be able to act rational in your relationships. This is why people cheat on each other. This is why people then break up, because of their doubts in their mind, because they don't know what the other person is thinking about, and they assume. This assumption comes from the lack of information. A lot of relationship ends, or a lot of relationship have issues because people just assume what the other person wants, or assumes what the other person hates, and they make decisions based on that. This assumption is exactly tackled down by the idea of radical honesty, because radical honesty does not allow room for assumption to happen, because all of the information exists, thus making better rational decisions. Thus, the decisions that you can make with your partner and make to your partner is more well fitted for the partner, people being more satisfied with the decisions that exist. Second piece of argument, the dynamics of relationships and why we have better relationships on our side of the house. 2 points of this. First of all, we habituate our partners to open up. A lot of times you get shocked when you marry someone because new information comes out that you didn't even know when you were still dating them. Also, the society normalizes this, which means this results into better rational decisions when you marry someone and when you want to engage with someone. The problem when this norm does not exist is people inherently won't try to find out the truth because it is not normalized to tell the truth. Thus, the truth then comes out sometimes, or most of the times, when you already make irreversible decisions, when you already engage with the person, when you're already married with the person, when you already have kids with the person, then this information comes out. Then suddenly you are not prepared to handle with this information, thus creating a relationship that is far way more rocky and far more damaging for the person, because you realize too late on what should have been done. We are preventing this exactly because it is normalized for you to try to dig deeper before you make these decisions, before you make decisions of marrying someone, of being engaged to someone, thus us normalizing the idea that you probably won't be married to a shitty person, or you probably won't be engaged to a person. The manifestation of this argument is you can get away from potentially bad marriage and bigot partners. You don't have to marry them. You can quickly get out from people with a lot of issues because it is normalized to communicate these issues, thus you knowing what your partner really is, and thus you being able to make a decision, or you being able to calculate whether or not this partner will be good for you. But more than that, there also exists more scrutiny for people who actually lie, for people who cheat, for people who do these types of bad things, because now, since the norm is already applicated because if the norm is applicated, people who do not tell the truth, or people who do bad things to their partner, will be heavily scrutinized. This manifestation of the argument looks like there will be more incentive for people not to cheat because they fear of this heavy scrutiny. There will be more incentive for people not to lie to their partners because of this heavy scrutiny, and this also incentivizes people to not do bad things to their partner. Proud to propose.
Great. Thank you, Prime Minister, for that fine speech. To move on this debate, leader of opposition, you may begin.
Am I audible and visible?
Yep, perfectly audible and visible.
Okay, if you want to POI, just open your microphone. I'm not going to look at the chat. I don't necessarily have any gender pronoun preference, but please do call me LO. If I have connection issue or audio issue, please just call out. Wait. Let me set my timer. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I don't think opening government really understand what radical honesty really means, right? They talk about how you're supposed to telling the truth, and how it's okay because it's going to be making your relationship better because you understand one another better. I don't think this is necessarily radical honesty, because this is just normal honesty and what you should practice on a healthy relationship. What we meant by radical honesty is there is no boundaries to what kind of information you give toward your partner. No matter how ugly they are, you're going to tell it to their face that they are ugly. On how, for example, if you think that their family member is stupid, you're going to tell it to straightforward to them on how your brother is kind of stupid, for example, right? This is the kind of thing that opening government need to actually defend, on how they need to actually prioritize defending whether or not this particular information is, one, important within a relationship to ensure that the relationships are going to be good in the future, and secondly, on how it's not going to hurt individual, therefore negating all of their benefit coming from opening government, right? So in my speech, I'm going to bring to two things, right? One, I'm going to explain to you that radical honesty actually blur the line of personal boundary, and this is actually bad for not only the relationship but individual in terms of mental health. But secondly, on how communication still exists under opposition side of the house and will be better with some white lies here and there, right? So before moving on to any substantive, several framework we need to understand within this debate, right? I think that radical honesty, as I said before, is going to tell your partner the way it is, right? No matter what personal thing that matters toward your partner, for example, their family member or their personal belief like religion, etc., you're going to tell it as it is, right? And we say that a romantic relationship is not necessarily only about two people who is in love with another. This is a commitment in which it is where it is a social structure where two individuals are trying to actually compensate, trying to actually sacrifice something for them to actually live together and fulfill their emotional and physical need at the end of the day, right? Under opening opposition, we believe that we want to have healthy romantic relationship. Therefore, we are going to promote that small white lies here and there is actually okay, right? And in terms of normalizing or having norm of this particular radical honesty, we think that it is much more than what opening government really talk about, right? When they talk about how we are going to encourage individual, on how people are going to make seminars, on you people, society are going to hold you accountable, etc. Right? We think that norm, when we're talking about norm, this is a standard in which public are going to expect people to follow this to the teeth, right? To the point of shaming and calling out individual who tell white lies or who tell something that is not truthful at the end of the day, when we think this is very bad. First argument regarding whether or not this radical honesty are going to blur the line of personal boundary and why is it actually harmful, right? Under opening opposition, we think that romantic relationship is two or more different individuals that have different character, different lifestyle, different quirks, all in all different individuality at the end of the day, right? We think that radical honesty as a norm are going to dictate that there are no limit to both privacy and individuality within that particular relationship. All information is all good, right? Open and added as it is. It's going to bring two harm. One, when people lost their personal safe space, this is where relationship break down. We think that world is not a perfect, the world is not perfect, as OG said, on how people should love one another fully, right? We think that to get someone to like you, we need to accept the reality that you need sometimes to act differently in front of other people, right? To create a persona that attract other individual for you to actually be attractive at the end of the day, to find mate, to find partner that they are going to love you at the end of the day. We think that this is the reality that both government benches or other benches need to actually accept at the end of the day. We think the introduction of norm like brutal honesty, there are two scenarios that's going to happen. One, you either cannot build this particular persona, therefore romantic relationships are unlikely to exist anyway. Why so? Because people will never like other individual 100% the way they are, right? For example, no matter how loving you are toward your partner, there are certain quirks that this particular individual that you don't like. For example, they snore too loud, or they have certain habit when they're talking to other people. This particular thing is what we hide with white lies and etc. Right? We think that romantic relationship will never happen under opening government, right? But moreover, when we're talking about people who already have dual persona, this norm are going to make sure that this particular individual can never go back to their own self, therefore harming their mental health, because they are forced to actually uphold this particular persona to the end of time, right? We say that this is very harmful. But second layer, in terms of how, certain things within your relationship are just for you to actually know and to understand, right? We think that even within a very romantic relationship, we think there are things within your personal life that no other people can actually understand, right? For example, why we actually, as an individual, like a certain activities more than anything, right? You cannot actually put it into word. You cannot actually explain to your partner why you hate someone or why you actually hate certain activities, right? We think that this particular thing is very personal. We are talking about religion. Why do you believe in that particular religion is something that is very personal, and we think that the moment you actually dictate that everyone need to have this brutal honesty, you're going to actually break this particular safe space of this individual, because you are actually going to invalidate this individuality and personal belief at the end of the day, because people are going to directly question everything that their partner believe, because that's the way brutal honesty works, right? But before moving on, yes, OG.
You
Yeah,
cannot operate under the
people. Okay, Kevin goes.
You cannot operate under the idea that the norm of accepting people's lies still operate under the same in your side. People are more normalized to these type of ideas. The exact reason people cannot accept truth in your side of the house because it is so uncommon.
Under opening opposition, we do not say that you should, lies all the time, right? This is not normal. Within a relationship, you should still have honesty. But the limitation, the delta is on whether or not you should have a restraint to what kind of information and what kind of question that you should actually ask your partner at the end of the day. So in conclusion, we believe that this particular norm is not healthy for individual and relationship and prevent most romantic relationship at the end of the day, right? But moving on to my second point, in regard whether or not communication still exists under opposition side of the house and why is it actually much better. I think that sure, truth hurt and we need to actually accept it, right? Most thing is personal to you, for example, like religion or your family member, right? Opening government talk about how this particular thing is very important within this debate, within the relationship for one another to know on how it's going to be too late for you to actually ask this particular question when you're already married or engaged, right? We think that this particular problem that opening government try to bring within this debate is not exclusive to whether or not white lies exist or not, but it problem of hasty relationship, whether or not you can actually understand your partner before you go into marriage or go to engagement, right? This is not exclusive to whether or not white lies exist, right, ladies and gentlemen? But moreover, we think that communication still exists under our side of the house the moment you actually acknowledge that certain thing actually is very important for you to hold belief and not being questioned by your partner. I'm very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Liberal competition for the to continue the debate on the government house. Deputy Prime Minister, you may begin.
Can I be heard and seen? Okay.
You are audible.
Your eyes are strictly through unmuting yourself. I'm going to offer one, or I will prioritize CO. And this. Do realize that's why Kevin's speech is incredibly important. It's because it's the norm to be radically honest. It's not only about the dynamic of your relationship when you are inside them, but also the options you make before you even opt to start in relationship. That's why our case becomes magnificently important, because to know that every very important decisions in your romantic life is irreversible. It is impossible for you to return your children or return your marriage after you do it. Therefore, the harm in opposition stays forever, and that's why it becomes incredibly cruel. Framing to kick out OO. Two things. First, I think OO cannot run on a framework in which persona or even the persona you make when you are dating to be romantic stays forever. Realize that romantic relationships is not all unicorns and rainbows. You have to engage in cases in which you fight with your partner, there's tears involving in that, but that's exactly why we think that under the side of the house, it doesn't work anyway, because persona that they're trying to explain will still disappear anyway instead opposition. So they still have to engage in which you incorporate white lies when you realize that your partner is that ugly to begin with. But second, realize panels that under the logic of opening opposition, you will cheat to your partner, but say white lies the way Nate did to Maddie, for example. Oh, I still love you, Maddie, I will change, I will marry you. Under the logic of, you will have to save hatred to your family instead of actually communicating it with your partner, and even having him, for example, making understandings with you and explaining it in the most communicative way. So we're going to take the bullet, right? Opening government will explain why, even if it goes to that extent of radicality, that's okay, and it's exactly very good. Under two reasons. First, if it's then that bad, at least you communicate, at least you understand the truth. Because what's gonna be even worse is when you learn the truth for someone else, or when you already understand the truth after a long time of loving someone. That's why you feel a huge sense of hatred, of betrayal, of sadness that happens in opening opposition. But even if then that's really bad, right? Say it crushes you down, it crumbles you down. We say humans have time to heal. You still have your friends and your families to cheer you up. And if it's that bad, then just opt out from a relationship. What happens in opening opposition is that you delay this process of you moving on and not investing your time in very toxic relationships. That's why you get really, really bad relationships in opening opposition. Actually two things in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to talk about personal boundaries and safe spaces. But secondly, later I'm going to my extension, we talk about why people is able to handle the truth and why this improves your relationship to the fullest extent. First, let's talk about personal boundaries. Wilson tries to talk about how people is going to lose their personal safe space, and that's incredibly important, right? First, I just want to clarify that not everyone even have safe space to begin with. Do realize a lot of the times people wants to run into their partner, or I am very attached to my partner, is because I don't feel happy in my own family because I don't have a good relationship with my mother, for example. That's why Kevin's analysis is incredibly important, because your partner can be really, really crucial for the sake of your mental health. That's why you have to choose the best one before or after after this norm existing, right? But even if they want to still talk about how, this is like you surpassed someone's personal boundaries, first, I think an action of having a partner or letting someone come into your life is already a form of compromising personal boundaries. First, you let them know your most vulnerable state in emotions. You tell them, I feel incredibly depressed today. That's already a form of consensual thing of personal boundaries. Second, you tell them every day about your agenda, about your day, how's your NUDC. Third, when you let your partner know that your friends and vice versa, letting them go or even know your family, that's already a form of you getting to know them, right? That means this also exists in opposition, because you cannot just have a partner that's not going to understand you in your most vulnerable state, because that's the point of having a romantic relationship, right? The conclusion of this premise is to say that first, it also happens in opening opposition or opposition bench, but second, it is normal and you consented when you opt into dating this person. That's why our analysis about choosing who you're going to let these emotions that's very vulnerable is really, really important. Plus, if you don't like them, then you wouldn't just even consider taking such a big leap in your life. Say dating them, say marrying them, and whatever. Secondly, I just want to clarify or glorify even Kevin analysis about communication, because do realize that when you communicate, it's much easier and faster for you to opt out from something that's not worth it for you to invest, right? That's why we think that things like cheating, for example, might be really, really hurtful for you, but at least when you're able to know the truth, that's when you're able to improve yourself. Even do realize, what have I done, or evaluate yourself in a relationship, even if you don't break up with it, right? Say, I don't like this thing when you done to me, so next, let's just not do it. What happens in OO is that you're going to sugarcoat things. It's okay, I still love you. It's okay that you cheat on me because at least you're still here with me. Those things doesn't happen opening government. What happens is that you get a much more qualitative relationship, elevated and much better. Before I go into my 3 points of extension and 3 layers of extension, I'll take closing opposition.
Is this case reliant on the fact that any relationship with any sort of lies at all will always turn out to be bad? How do you exactly determine the metric of a good relationship, and why is that objective?
Okay, yeah. So in general, I think everyone agrees that white lies isn't good, right? Would you like it if I told you that I love you even though I don't? So let's not just think that white lies is going to be good. But the metric we explained to you in this debate how a relationship can be good is when you're able to be really honest, is when you habituate yourself to be really honest, is when you don't lie and you're able to communicate that even though it takes you in your worst day. Extension, why people will be able to handle the heretical truth. First, the reason why people cannot handle the truth, we all have to understand, is that because it is so uncommon to hear that and we're used to be in our room of comfortability and safe space. But normalizing the idea of radical honesty means that there's going to be some changes. It's going to be have like gradual changes. Means you normalize people with uncomfortable truths. You normalize the idea of painful truth, and that's how you cope with them, right? So people will be able to handle the truth way more. This manifests into people actually being able to solve issues in relationship instead of running away and suppressing your trauma. Too, but we're going to bite the bullet and say that the truth really hurts, that the radical honesty is painful anyway, right? Because any kind of lies, including white lies, by the way, amplifies the pain when you find out the lie, since OONet does not give you an explanation on why the truth won't be found out eventually anyway, right? So they haven't answered that burden. 3, the likelihood on why white lies will eventually be found out and any type of lies is because people inherently are not built to lie. Lying is a form of defense mechanism done by humans. But do note that when this norm doesn't exist, it amplifies and magnifies more inside opposition. So what you get is a relationship full of lies, full of distrust and bad communication, and investing your time in toxic relationship without knowing how to opt out in that. All of my arguments is really important in order for you to have a more dynamical, more romantic, and even a better communication. Therefore, very proud to propose vote for Airlangga.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for that fine speech. Let's continue the debate. Deputy Leader, Mr. Sisson.
Check, am I audible and visible?
Yep, perfectly audible and visible.
Okay, thank you. POI to chat. Oh yeah, for Prasanti, if you want to POI, I will accept later, but please don't use the microphone because before you POI, I don't hear to what you say. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Relationship is all about sacrifices, right? Whether or not you're going to sacrifice your time, your money, your energy, and basically all the things that you have. But all those sacrifices are worth it the moment you are going to see and meet the one you love and the one who you think you will accompany you till the end of time. But also at that, there is a trade-off, right? Understand, for example, after a long week of debating, learning a lot of those kind of training about you want to die, suffer in your bed alone, but suddenly your girlfriend say, let's eat out and do a walk around, but you have nothing to say. You basically say, yeah, I'm not tired, let's do that. But at the end of the day, those kind of lies are worth it because basically at the end of the day, you could see the face of someone that you really love. This is the kind of lies, that white lies that the opening position are trying to engage on, right? We are not trying to be radically honest like in the opening government, which how they are going to destroy those kind of relationship they are trying to protect at the end of the day. Because how at the end of the day, honesty is not really the best policy in the case of romantic relationship at the end of the day. This is the difference between a romantic relationship and a normal relationship that the opening government try to make it as if it's the same, but no, it's not. In a romantic relationship, the exclusivity is talking about how you are trying to understand the feeling of your other significant part, on how humans are very different, right? But because of that, you need to understand that there are sometimes that things that you don't like, but you still have to lie on, so your partner will be comfortable. But before that, 3 assumptions that opening government came into debate, right? Basically, they are assuming about how cheating is an exclusive benefit coming in the opening opposition, right? We say, no, cheating could exist both sides of the house, right? But the difference is, if cheating in the opening opposition, once you are caught up, you will say, even though you are already had enough with your partner, that's why you cheat. cheat, you will just say, no, it's my fault and I think we should break over. Therefore, you are not going to destroy your partner's feeling. But cheating in the opening government, you are going to tell all of the broken things coming from your partner. Not only you are already breaking their feeling by cheating, but you're also going to break their heart by also telling all the brutal truth that exists. That's how you are not only destroying the people you used to love, but you're also destroying a human feeling itself. We say cheating is already the norm anyway, but how cheating will still exist both ways. But the question is, which side of the house will actually decrease the harm coming from cheating itself? We say the answer is in the opening opposition. We say people will just keeps on cheating if they are cheater from the first place. That's why let's not talk about them. We say talks about the after effect. But second of all, opening government came to this debate talking about how they assume that not everyone have needs for a space. Three responses, right? First, it's very unfair for you to say that not everyone not everyone needs a safe space, because safe space is basically a place where you are trying to be alone, place where you're gathering all the energy that you needed, right? We say you should not abolish this kind of parameter alone. The moment that you are trying to throw this kind of burden towards the opening opposition, think, is it going to be fair if we are going to throw the burden to you, explaining about how radical honesty, there is no kind of but how harm encouraging the radical honesty is going to be very good at yourself the house. We say the burden is not fair, it's not going to work. But second of all, we say about how the moment that opening government came to this debate talking about how they say people don't need, not everyone need a safe space, they agree about how they agree about how they should abolish this kind of safe space. That's the moment about how the harm coming from Wilson's speech, explaining to you about how at the end of the day, people also need a place to actually gather the energy, and about how take the time to actually revitalize, to accept the limitation that their partners have. That's how you create a healthier relationship. It's only exclusive in the opening opposition side of the house. But third of all, the opening government came to this debate, basically talk about how even if people have a safe space, the only safe space that they will have is with their partner, right? We say about how sometimes you will always get tired, right? Whether it's work, school, or other things. Sometimes even you are going to have a fight, and a large fight with your partner, as simple as because you say about sometimes she sounds too loud, right? But we say about how the moment that you think that the only safe space that you have is your girlfriend, not yourself, that's how you started going to create a dependency. That's how you're not going to create a healthy relationship like the opening government really wanted to achieve. That's how you are going to create a very toxic relationship where you are going to do anything, you are going to destroy anyone as long as you could be with your partner at the end of the day. The reason why this kind of toxicity will never exist in the opening opposition is as simple because we are not going to be dependent with our significant other because about how at the end of the day, we are going, the moment that we are sick of our partners, we are going to take a time on ourselves and about how we are trying to understand what the things that is happening, and sometimes going to contribute with a lie about how saying that there is sometimes even if your partner is the one who is wrong, you will say, no, it's my fault. But before that, yes, POICG.
Don't you think that the safe place that you mentioned before is only created by the expectation that price because you're telling a lie that create the illusions that this person loves you, meanwhile they don't even love?
Okay, basically the safe space that you think that I'm assuming is going to be only created by an assumption, also created by assumption in yourself, the house. The moment that you want to say about how safe space is only assumption, you should also say, you should also take the burden about how safe space also exists in yourself. The difference is safe space in opposition of the house is going to be in ourselves or with our friends or with other people, not exclusive only with the partners. In yourself, the house, you have a bigger burden to explain why the only safe space that you will get with your partner is going to be enough at the end of the day. But furthermore, we say about why assumption won't be, even if all of the things is going to be an assumption, we say it won't be as bad. It won't be as bad. First reason is because basically these kind of things will never happen, right? The harms, all of the worst thing about how basically you will destroy and harms other people and create a toxic relationship will never happen. The assumption is the assumption, all of the things that will destroy your partner's heart happens the moment you are going to talk, right? So assume even in ourselves, the house, what will happen? We are not going to talk about how the bad things coming from our partners. We are just going to be silent, right? About how we are going to keep it in ourselves. We are going to take the bullet. We say about how it's going to destroy, about how sometimes the mentality that exists. But at the same time, the mentality are also created about how we say the safe space, about how we say about how the people that support us is our significant other, right? That's why we are going to try to risk all the things that we have to not lose this kind of person that we really love. That's how in the opening opposition is the only side of the house that is going to keep this kind of romantic relationship at the end of the day. Under the reason I'm proud to oppose.
Right. Thank you, Deputy of Opposition. That is the end of the opening half of the debate. To start the closing half of the debate, member of government, you may begin.
All right. Am I audible and visible? Okay.
Yep, perfectly audible and visible.
Okay. Before I start, all of the POIs go through chat, and I don't have any specific gender pronouns. And let me set my stopwatch. All right. I will start in 3, 2, 1. We can agree that in love relationship, I can assume that everyone wants to feel they are special to someone else and done the best for their partners, right? This is the status quo that we're having right now. But in the current status quo, what will be happen? A lot of people do not know or even don't have the capability of doing so or even manifest this kind of thing because they are trapped under the glorification that love is equal to suffer, like what O mentioned before, right? So then I think the only way that you can treat someone else that's special or even you can done the best is by a lie. In our side, we can. I will prove to you how even with telling a radical harness, you can still be special to other people, or even you can still do the best. Not like what O mentioned right before. But before I move on to my substantive, let's see engagement opening opposition. The first one, I think that they mentions that because you are being honest, that means you will tell a lot of hurt to your partner and other things. I think OO have misconceptions between you being honest and also being a mean, right? Because what they say is you being a mean to someone else. That just because you're telling the truth doesn't mean that you will judge other people. There is a way of communicating to other people. There is a way for you to talk and also being honest to your partner. Especially you are in love, that means the way that you're communicating and telling the truth will be something that's special, right? Even though you are not sugarcoating this. So I think it is already felt. And if it's true, like OO mentioned, I think it is your issues. There is issues with you being mean with someone else, right? That there's no correlation with you being radically honest. And the second thing, though, they mentioned about the safe place and also this created in your site. I think the safe place created by 2 elements. The first one, it's created by the trust. And how you gain a trust is when you are being honest with someone else, right? I don't think you will be trust someone that lied to you, right? It doesn't make sense. And the second thing is about the connection. This is how you create the safe place, right? Because the way that you have the safe place is when you feel like I have the connection to this other person, and I believe it is really hard for you to create a connection to other people when you know and aware that you are lying to this person and also you telling a whole manipulation story to your partner, right? So in your side, it only will fall to the expectation that will be rising because you think that your partner is being safe with you and also think that all of the things that your partner said is truth, right? So in the long run, this kind of illusions. This kind of expectation will fall into illusion that trap you, that this is the kind of love that justify and also normalize things like manipulation and other things, right? And the last thing before I move on, I think they all really justify cheating, right? In their cases, I don't think like how why when you are cheating then you have to sugarcoating something and telling it so your partner is not getting hurt, right? Because when you are cheating with other person, your partner already getting hurt in the very first place, right? So there is no other way, and I think it is going to be better when you telling your hard truth. That means even your partner is brutally hurt and etc. It is going to be easier for them to move on because they are realize that you are being a jerk in your relationship, right? Now moving on to my cases, I think our biggest contributions that will only access in the CG on how the comparison will look like, because I think OG has failed to mention to you how the glorification exists in the status quo and why it's failed. So in the very first case, let's discuss the current status quo, how the norm looks like in the current status quo, and why it is going to fail in the status quo that we're having right now in the current status that we have right now. I believe the norm looks like the glorifications, like I mentioned before, and the paradigm that love is equal to suffer. So no matter how suffer you are in relationship, you trust and you believe this is the way for you to achieve a real and also the absolute love that you wanted and be so pure and etc. Right? And I think when you are being true to other people, you will be judged as something that means to other people. This is how the norm looks like in our society, and this is how people are justified to you to being purity and love, right? So what will be happen if we using this kind of comparison, and why this is going to fail? I believe that people are gonna trap under this paradigm that, oh, it is okay for you to feel comfortable in your relationship because it is the way for you to get, and also this is the process of love. Meanwhile, it is not, that I will explain to you more. Second thing, so when this kind of thing happen, you will normalize the uncomfortable that exists within this relationship, right? When this kind of thing happen, I think in the long run, it is the moment for you to normalize something like manipulation exists in relationship, and a lot of toxic relationship happen under our case as a government, right? But before I move on, I think POI from OO.
Okay, when you're talking about normalizing being uncomfortable, don't you think that all benefit of having relationship are going to be gone because people don't like being uncomfortable to begin with, right?
Okay, I think yes, the uncomfortable might exist, but I think it is going to be bigger in your side as the opposition side of the team. I think it is going to be better, even if you are still uncomfortable. It will not be a long term in our case as government because you are communicating it and you being honest. In your side, it will be long term because you never telling the truth, right? So now moving on to my cases. And then, what is the process of love? That not only like communication, like OG mentioned. I think it's beyond that when you're creating the connection, right? Because the reason you're looking for love and is because you feel like your love in your family is not enough. Therefore, you're looking for someone else, right? You're seeking for something like exclusive and special relationship, right? And the process is really step by step, right? That is the moment that you want to establish the connection within this relationship, and I think it needs to be built upon the truth itself, right? You're never able to create a solid connection when you are lying to other people, right? Because it is harder for you to relate to your partner situation because you overall just lie that it is okay for you, right? And the second thing, though, I think even if in the last phase of process of love itself, when you are going to end your relationship, it is going to be better when you are radically honest in our side, because now it is clear the reason why you are break up. Both of your partner are clearly without any manipulation. So therefore, in your path to find a new love, it is going to be easier because now you are done blaming yourself because your partner manipulate you, for example. Now it is going to be easier even for you in the first step of love when you are seeking for other people. You know what are you looking for in love itself, right? So this is something that only exclusive happen in our side and never gonna happen in the case of opposition. And what are actually people looking for in relationship? I think it's a genuine feeling and also the secure feelings that exist, right? This is two things that we want to exist in our side of the team, right? And I think this genuine feeling is only exist by every single action that you do, right? And I think by being genuine, that means that how you could treat other people the way that you want it to, the way you being honest and how you communicate it with your partner, and also compromising that exists within your relationship. And by saying that, I'm really proud to be government. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, member of government for the kind speech. This is the debate on the student health member of opposition.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yep.
Great. I go through chat. I'm gonna take one from opening for engagement. I don't know if the disclaimer is necessary, but like this being live streamed as well. So anything I say does not reflect my personal opinion, really for the purpose of the debate. Okay. All relationships, especially romantic ones, are subjective. Insofar as no teams can determine what is a good standard for a relationship, that I think all three teams miss in this debate, CO will exclusively argue by providing agency. The classic extension is going to be the most important contribution debate. Three things. First, couple of framing. Second, agency. Lastly, why we have better relationship as a whole. On framing, two things, yeah? First, I want to break down the common debater logical fallacy that people constantly and continuously interact with a certain norm or narrative. We need people interact with the norm in a unique sense, especially twofold of scenarios under this motion. A, this happens during specific instances, very specific instances, talking about ugly truth like childhood trauma, for example, talking about the trauma that your previous partner caused you, talking about all the mistakes that you probably have done intentionally or unintentionally in the past. So these are the specific circumstances where this norm interacts with people. B, we think that some people find a relationship because they want to be accepted for who they are. Insofar as it's true, they are still likely to be honest to some degree. They're unlikely to do cheating or whatever, lying every single time that a government bench seem to have the intuition for. The difference is, under our side of the house, you can find the correct emotional capacity not to tell everything at a specific point in time where you don't feel comfortable in doing it. We think that even honesty in our side of the house can also be delivered insofar as people want to find that relationship. It's just the timing in our side of the house is also able to benefit under including opposition. But the second piece of framing, right? I think this framing is also very important to negate all the stuff that OG tried to argue. It's important as well to analyze that the misogynistic people who love to harm their partner, who love to cheat, that OG talk about, are unlikely to interact with the social media post or the discourse that opening government mechanism implies. And I ask them directly in the POI, right? Because they just have this asymmetric position in a relationship, usually the male in the romantic relationship whatsoever. I think this mechanism then adversely and disproportionately impact the weaker individual who are already under massive society scrutiny, but also justified using the posts and the feeds that they constantly interact with every time they open their phone. If it's true that people love to lie and cheat, it happens worse in God insofar as they practically are shielded from any actual consequences. This already wins over the opening deadlock because this usual classic Pratin weighing, right? This norm is harmful for the most vulnerable individual and therefore it's bad. But also this negates the entire absurdly dismissive context of cheating. This is not Nate realizing he fucked up, but Maddie not knowing what happened, not know Delta FS under opening government. Agency. Three things I'm gonna explain here. The first thing I want to talk about is the idea of agency, right? Basically, you take control of your emotion, you control your words, you control what you feel, you control what you say and what you don't say to other people. This sounds super trivial, but I think the way this becomes important is the second point, right? I want to evaluate the conception of radical honesty. I think all three things in this debate take for granted that this concept is feasible. We think it's not feasible. The first thing to see here is that humans biologically cannot understand everything they witness and experience. That's just biologically designated that way. But even if you consider that to be trivial, our previous framing wins the round because we tell you that in those very specific traumatic circumstances, even you as an individual person are actually trying to forget all of that stuff. The way your parents used to beat you up as children, the way you fucked up in round 5 and GDC and you're just trying to focus on this round. Humans logically and psychologically develop this as a defense mechanism to shift their focus. They don't want to continue to cling on past negative memories. They want to move on, for example. They even internally, they want to forget all that. The implication of this narrative then is horrid because it's not only principally horrible to force individuals to tell things that they don't want to tell, but also practically this forces you to relieve all of that emotion of that negative consequences. For example, when you share that story to your partner who you don't necessarily know, who you don't necessarily understand how they would react to that certain information. But I want to extend this to the grounded pragmatic consequences as well. What are the pragmatic consequences? We think it's at least threefold. A, this systematically prevents individuals with bad history or bad trauma whatsoever from ever opting into any relationship. This is extremely important. Understanding how OG cases turn out to be, of how, you tell them everything before the relationship even starts. Now, this means that no one will be able to get into a relationship. But even worse, some individuals who have a dark past, for example, they didn't consent to all the suffering and all those trauma. They will not be able to access the relationship because their partner sees them initially at a bad light. This means that insofar as humans have short-term and proximity biases, the partners are unlikely to receive any love at all. In our side of the house then, even if they want to share the story, they can do it later when they know that they want to share it, when they know that they're already comfortable enough with their partner, for example, to trust them in our side of the house, that they know how their partners would react given that certain information under our side of the house. So even honesty will still happen. It's just the timing that is correct under our side of the house. Under government side, they prevent systematically any relationship. But the second consequence is that this systematically locks out individuals from accessing their own emotional capacity. This is that someone needs to spend everything that they have for the relationship, even when they don't feel like it. But lastly, this is to you being afraid of your partner, right? They know everything, even when you don't feel that they should have probably known that at that specific point in time. This leads you to see them with a distrustful side, for example, you don't necessarily trust them in what they particularly want to do under government side of the house. In our side of the house, exactly because we told you the 5 minutes, right, it's gonna be better. Winning, right? 3 points. Why this is winning? First, I think agency is generally a prerequisite for a dignified life. The only way someone to have a fulfilled and dignified life is for them to fulfill their subjective preferences. And insofar as we give them agency to determine what they want to say, to determine what they want their relationship to look like, that's an a priori fundamental right. It's really important. Second, I think no one in this chamber has the epistemic access to objectively determine what is a good relationship. Insofar as the idea of good relationship in fact remains subjective. Tata might not like white lies, but Tata cannot claim that white lies are objectively bad and a priori bad. Some people seek relationship for mental relief, relationship for partners in crime, some do it for other stuff, and the action that they pursue will be radically different as well. In our side of the house, they have the agency to explore all that. Opening goal.
Your timeline analysis is important because that's also accessible on the other side of the house. The difference is that we are transparent and you sugarcoat. Your case literally backlash itself.
It doesn't. I don't understand where the PI is going. But last point of winning, why this is winning, this sounds a bit egoistic and selfish. But please remove your debate biases and understand 2 things. A, the relationship are pursued for individual utility anyway. But B, there will be no selfishness insofar as for a relationship to work. Both sides have to be at least less selfish. You have no practical harm. We have huge physical benefit. But lastly, this is very, very important. Yeah. I'm going to lastly evaluate the worst case that all the individual attempt to engage. If CO can prove to you that a relationship completely full of lies can still bring that positive utility, this extension wins the round by debate logic in a landslide. The first thing I want to say is to analyze that this is likely to be just a friends with benefit relationship or a hookup relationship, for example, which we presume should also exist under the scope of romantic relationship, insofar as they consider that that kind of relationship is the one that they want to pursue, that gives the individual utility, we think that's good. But even if you don't buy that, in our side, insofar as utility can be measured to a relationship, someone can still access the happiness even with all the lies. The company, the shoulder to cry on, the co-worker in raising children, whatever. Insofar as the benefit that they get outweighs the harm, the happiness that you felt during the course of the relationship was particularly real, that doesn't exist otherwise under government. But lastly, if you also don't buy that, what we provide is an opt-out mechanism. You can opt out of the relationship whatsoever when you feel that the harm outweighs the benefit. The comparative is under government bench then, you cannot access the relationship to begin with. You don't have a full symmetry of information to determine what is the good and what is the bad, what is the net positive and negative utility, because you don't have a choice of in a relationship. You're systematically locked out because of the society norm that is unjustified to begin with. We oppose.
Great. Thank you, member opposition, for that speech. It is the case inside government where you may be kept.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Viewers, goes to chat. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. He is going to take in this debate by telling you that there is an existing urgency that in which that we need to support this narrative, where it happens in exactly placed in every single phase in which the relationship happens, when you have to process in which how you're going to tap into it, or when inside of it, or when you want to move on. There is an existing pressure that exists outside of this norm that makes you every single time will lead into the sacrifice and many other narratives that exist and norms that are already explained by the opposition side of the house. Therefore, I'm going to address you one big class in this debate. I'm going to talk about why this is an urgency, why it is a norm that we need to support to actually go in against with the countervailing narrative that exists in the status quo, with what my contribution of member not even established. Firstly, there are many romanticization of ways in which people would pursue a relationship. There are many countervailing narratives that pushes people to not necessarily being honest, such as using white lies often for the sake of your partner. This is when you want to appear as the best partner ever. This happens continually as the constant pressure to do this is big, since you're directly experiencing that your white lies is actually making your partner happy. Note that this is how you probably realize that you yourself is the one that can make them happy, i.e. expecting that you can make them happy all the time. They say that your work might not necessarily that bad, so we can have a dinner tonight or whatsoever, or telling your partner that we can have another try in the situation in which that you already know that probably you would have this time around in the future. It's something that's going to happen under opposition. This is crucial because all of these things happen at the same gravity with where the norm of encouraging people to use radical honesty exists. You can like do this everywhere. Even there is a song representing those things, telling that it is okay as long as you can smile and be happy. My sacrifice won't go to waste and you don't need to know it. Your circles of friends, every single interaction in your life will be reflected into this anyway. This also explains that there is a countervailing narrative that also exists in the same power in this power symmetry that exists within what we are going to support in the government house. Thus, this is how exactly it's going to further exacerbate any harm that exists in the status quo. Then where all these things manifest then? we're going to talk about the safe space that opening opposition talks about. This is how you're going to explain how it is going to be like manifest directly, materialized better under CG. First, it exists in many phases of relationship as a process in which that we are going to interact and engage into romantic relationships, for example. This is one, when you step into your relationship, like my member said, when you're already trying to communicate and wanting to settle several things, when you already have this discussion and trying to seek consensus so you can date your partner probably, like living together or even interaction that is further within what you have when you're just friends, for example. Second of all, when you already want to settle further, for example, trying to have a commitment with your partner, telling your families that this person is the one that will be like your wife or your husband, for example, like wanting to go to the marriage. But thirdly, it is also when things don't go well, when it is better to separate ways, when you really don't think that this is the right relationship you should be in. With the explanation of the lies can continue even further and being supported by the options of the past with the countervailing narrative that is also as strong as when it happens when you don't necessarily support this narrative to encourage people to be radical honest. There are several things to happen. Number one, you will lie a lot when you still freshly tap into a relationship. You really think that the happiness is the most important thing. You, as long as both of you happy, no matter what that means that you could use, this is going to be really great. It's how exactly the lies in which it happens are going to be continued and being supported when you just into the relationship. But second of all, you will try to realize that it is not good if you really want to commit and stay in the relationship, but you cannot do anything. It's a continuation of what you have done in the past. You always agree anyway. You're already comfortable of telling lies sometimes, but that's the best choice as a result of your own biases. Note that when you reach the point in which that everything doesn't work really well, that's the moment you are unable to have a good phase of opting out of a relationship. It is not only that you cannot opt out, but even if you opt out from a relationship, you will still have a lot of things remains, making it harder for you to move on or even unable to see the better relationship in the next one, since you will post this expectation you cannot fulfill as the parameter of your current relationship to have. This is how bad the safe space the oppositions want to have. Comparatively, what we want to have under the surveillance of government is that one, safe place is about trust because you don't feel like you can actually save and you don't necessarily know what the truth is. But second of all, safe place is about a connection that you are aware that this is not the condition of illusions, like what my member already explained, like opposition want to champion. But third of all, wanting to opt out is much better because there's no manipulation going to exist, and this is how exactly we're going to operate into more romantic relationship. But fourth of all, we are not working in the time bomb, but what the time bomb is going to exist under oppositions of the past. I'm going to engage the POI later. How then we are going to address this and interact this with closing opposition? Number one, when they talk about timing, we say that you won't never get good timing at all, because everything that happens within their explanation will constantly affected by the norm that exists outside of the norm that we are trying to encourage in this debate. This resulted into you will then interact with the narrative even more, further lying and lying without necessarily think that at which time in which you can get the timing better. There is no explanation as to why then you could actually derive more explanation as to why you can get this better timing. It is really different within the context of CEO explanation then, because there is no further norm that supports that how can people get the exact timing to say everything or to stop lying. Note that this is precisely address every single point that CEOs have regarding agencies and stuff. But secondly, in terms of the way that people probably not going to opt into relationship, I don't think that that's true, because we still have to do compatibility anyway. So even if you tell the radical honesty when you already reach a consensus, you will gain that anyway. But second of all, on the idea of objective metric, this is really subjective anyway. Like you also don't have the capacity to do this under CEO. The last in which that we explain is about how it addresses issuing where the timing might be wrong, resulting to the harm manifest further later on. But before I move on, CEO, yes.
We said preemptively that even a relationship built on lies can still give some sort of utility insofar as you didn't engage with this extension false. But we question what will relationship exist in Gulf anyway, insofar as we prove to you a priori that bad light that you will put yourself upon systematically locks you out of relationship anyway. Please engage.
No, that won't happen because there is contrariness that further exacerbates every single condition that you would have. Move on. Why we are going to let's frame out OO then. Number one, it is not like they themselves explained already what is the ideal for a relationship that you can get. We're explicitly saying that being radical honest and use them doesn't equal to being mean. It is not like a way in which you can interact with our partner. I don't see why people can be really aggressive like what you have been established under opening opposition. Secondly, note that this is how you fall into the wrong narrative that will destruct yourself at the end. The moment they say that love is all about sacrifice, that is the moment they claim themselves that the norm that exists in the status quo is something that's really bad as opposed to what exists in what we are going to support under our house. They also never tell any comparative of this, hence that's when our harm plays in the debate even further. But how we are going to contextualize OG? First, they never explain why is it really important to support this narrative outside from soft listing the harms of communication that not being genuine on their side. Our case is much important because the explanation in which that there are a lot of existing narrative that harms more people is existing on the status quo. Therefore, this norm is the only norm that could actually combat the norm and going against with that norm. But second of all, we also address where everything plays. We specifically explain to you the exact phases in which that every single thing in the relationship happens, making the benefit of your side of OG becomes much clearer because it is directly explaining where in which time that it happens. For all this reason, we think that CG already taken this debate.
Great. Thank you, government, for that speech. Because the overall the topic is good. We need to get.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you're loud and clear.
Okay, just give me some time to set up my timer. If anyone wants to POI, please do so through the chat. I'm gonna be taking one from opening government at around 5 minutes. All right, I'm gonna begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So I'm going to talk about two issues in this speech. First, I'm going to talk about how you actually make better relationship and how we actually preserve the fundamental access of agency to individuals. And secondly, where I'm actually going to talk again about the issue, but how even if the relationship is full of flaws, it's still going to be good anyway, right? But first, I think I just want to re-clarify again, right? Because I think that opening government and closing government didn't get this about this debate, is that not everyone actually interacts with this narrative in a sense that this debate is not about the extreme sense about you actually being in an abusive relationship. It's not about you cheating on individuals, for example, because most likely these are the individuals that will not even care about the relationship to begin with. They just go in the relationship having some fun. For example, they don't want to marry or they don't want to do anything about their partner in the long term. For example, they just want to screw them over after relationship, etc. So most likely the kind of norms they talk about to prevent the cheating, to prevent toxic relationships, etc., coming from closing government and open government does not work because these are not the people within the scope of the debate to begin with. And even if it's true, most likely it's going to be bad because it gives power, for example, for misogynistic people, for example. That's what Justin told you, right? So that's 70% of opening government and closing government case done. So two issues in this debate then. Firstly, how do we actually create better relationship? The problem with this particular argumentation is because like opening government and closing government took this particular individual characterization to the very extreme. They think that every single individual have an incentive to lie 24/7, ladies and gentlemen. I do not think this is actually a nuanced characterization of human beings, ladies and gentlemen, insofar as we are not people that want to lie every single time to our partner, right? Just the reason as to why we break this deadlock, right, is we actually told you, right? We told you the reason as to why people most likely lie and people most likely do not talk about their past is because they do not want to talk about their past because of severe trauma, ladies and gentlemen. This is quite true because most likely you do not want to actively lie about your partner because number one, it is quite exhausting, but number two, we are living in a capitalistic world where we always have to have a persona to our higher us, for example, and we want an individual in a romantic relationship in order for us to be ourselves, for example. So most likely we do not lie out of like want and out of inherent will, but out of necessity for self-defense mechanism, ladies and gentlemen. The reason as to why this is quite important is because we break the deadlock in opening when we actually give you a nuanced characterization on why people lie, for example, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, right, exactly when we actually know these people do this because of self-defense mechanism, then it's completely evil for opening government and closing government to force these people to actually want to like express themselves in a full radical honesty manner because it's simply unfair for them to like expose all of these things to your partner even though you're only dating for 2 months and you're not necessarily comfortable, meaning that it's also important for the urgency mechanism that was also missing in opening obligation, right? So how do we fix romantic relationship under our side then, which is also the deadlock under opening debate and also to some degree closing government, right? The way that we break this is that when we tell people that, hey, if you want to opt into a relationship, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to spill about every single detail or every single trauma of your life to your partner immediately when you're dating them. This means that number one, people can actually opt into a relationship because they do not fear of the fact, they do not fear of the instance in which in the future, oh my God, I have to tell all this trauma to my partner, for example, because there's still a veil of defense, there's still a veil of ignorance there, and there's still a veil of opportunity for them to not talk about this thing to your partner. So you do not have like this immediate trauma and immediate urgency in your mind, immediate like bad future, for example, in your mind that tells you that this relationship might fail. But number two, then notice that when you're in a relationship, for example, you can know your partner better, ladies and gentlemen. This is what doesn't told you, right? There is a timing here, ladies and gentlemen. When you get to know your partner, when you actually know about like their, their preferences, you talk about them, you actually develop like a good thing with one another, for example, that is the point in which when you are going to be more comfortable with telling the truth, because you feel like your partner is someone that can actually accept you of who you are, despite your past mistakes, for example. I think the timing here is quite important, because the comparison under opening government and closing government is that when you have to spill all these things immediately to your partner, for example, either A, you are not going to be feel comfortable about it, as compromising their agency, or B, because you are immediately have to tell this without any knowing your partner completely, for example, ladies and gentlemen, you are actively not going to have the mental capacity, because you do not do the mental capacity of your partner, for example, and maybe this like whole spilling about your trauma and etc. is not going to be that good for talks to begin with, right? So if you actually want a good talk, you need to have time first, which we actually provide this field, because they can finally decide on whether or not and what timing they actually want to spill this particular trauma to your partner, meaning that communication is going to be better under outside the house. Two things. This is quite important, because number one, it actually fills the missing burden under opening government and closing government, but how communication actually works. But number two, we also fill in the missing burden coming from opening objection, telling you to rebut opening government and closing government, but how communication will only be better under their side of the house, because opening objection only talks to you about like safe space, etc., which has never really been quite explained. And we also fill the missing mechanism in opening objection, which when they told you about how relationship will not exist, we actually recognize that. We're actually telling you about how notice that when this timing is taught, most likely the talks and etc. will not be effective to begin with. So that's how we're missing all of the burdens under opening and closing government team. So because of that, first pass an issue belongs to us. Before that, OG, go ahead.
Don't strawman our argument. Our argument operates under every general relationship. Don't run away from the burden. But second thing, Justin considered that every relationship needs sacrifice. Why is it the agency that you are not willing to sacrifice not part of the sacrifice? And what is the significant harm of the agency sacrifice?
Number one, I'm not strawmanning, because your argument literally says every single person will lie because of pride or whatever. So I'm not really strawmanning. I'm literally repeating what you said. But number two, when Justin told you about sacrifice, we literally told you sacrifice. Yes, maybe that exists, but timing is important, right? We need to talk. We need to actually know whether your partner is up to the talk for whatever. You need to make sure that you do not just dump into your partner, and you might have to make sure that your partner is actually capable of actually trying to like internalize all these like traumatic things, because it's really heavy. For example, so yes, sacrifice exists, but but you cannot just force this upon two people and just force people to spill their gas. That is not ideal, because humans have like mental capacity, as I told you before, right? So number two, let's talk about how even if the relationship is completely full of lies, why it's still better to begin with. Number one, opening government and closing government never really explain why this particular relationship built on lies is necessarily bad to begin with. Opening government tells you about how, it's bad if the 20-year relationship, when you have children, for example, is going to be exposed by a veil of lies, for example. Exactly. You can have a 20-year relationship where you have children to begin with, where you have marriage with your partner, for example, and it's still fine. You have 20 years. Why is that? Why does that particular relationship cannot exist under outside house? Because notice that lies doesn't always automatically mean that you're going to have a bad relationship. Insofar as the happiness that you get from the relationship, even if it's built on lies, is still true to begin with, and it feels your utilitarian benefit in the mind. But secondly, notice that not all lies are going to be detrimental to your relationship, right? You just assume this. We think that the lies that most likely will going to exist is, for example, if you do not want to share your trauma, etc., like Justin told you before. The reason as to why, so if you do not tell this lie or do not tell this fact or trauma to your partner, for example, and it doesn't like affect the relationship in the sense that maybe you handled the problem in the past, maybe you left that problem behind, maybe you're not the same person anymore in the past, for example, I do not think that this particular lies and this particular, things that you do not say to your partner will affect the relationship in any way. So in that regard, we'll also have a happy relationship under outside the house. So because we actually can give you better communication, how we do not actually beat your sense of urgency, and how we actually told you and breaking the worst case scenario, which automatically wins us over golf, but how even if it's full on lies, it's still a good relationship. We're very proud to win SCO. Thank you very much.
Thank you, opposition, for that speech. That is the end of the debate. You may call floor, shake hands. Congratulations for witnessing the fair eliminated of NUDC, everyone. Please use the breakup room so that the judges may start conferring and wait for the beginning. Thank you for the great debate.
Thank you, Kak. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Direct the